This is Medical Device Legal News. Today is September 19th, 2023. I'm Sam Bernstein. Over the last few weeks, the FDA has released a number of important guidance documents relevant to medical device manufacturers. On September 15th, the FDA issued guidance regarding the FDA's Voluntary Improvement Program. The VIP is a voluntary program that evaluates the capability and performance of a medical device manufacturer utilizing third-party appraisals to improve medical device design, production, and quality. For companies participating in the VIP, the FDA may consider submitted information and risk-based inspection planning. Participating manufacturers may also have an opportunity to utilize a modified submission format for pre-market approval applications and humanitarian device exemption 30-day notices for modifications to manufacturing procedures and manufacturing site changes. As you may be aware, the FDA's guidance documents do not establish legally enforceable responsibilities unless specific regulatory or statutory requirements are cited. And if and when finalized, FDA guidance instead describes the agency's current thinking on a topic and should primarily be viewed as recommendations. On September 15th, the FDA issued two draft guidance documents for medical devices with indications associated with weight loss. The documents address clinical study design, benefit risk analysis, and non-clinical testing recommendations to support a pre-market submission. Comments to this guidance are due within 60 days of publication in the Federal Register. Also on September 15th, the FDA issued updated guidance regarding the Breakthrough Device Program. Among other topics, the updates clarify how the program applies to certain innovative medical devices that may address health inequities and certain non-addictive medical products to treat pain or addiction. The guidance also explains the factors that the FDA considers to determine whether a device is more effective at providing treatment or diagnosis of life-threatening or irreversibly debilitating human diseases or conditions in order for a device to qualify for the Breakthrough Device Program. On September 8th, the FDA issued guidance on the use of International Standard ISO 10993-1, the biological evaluation of medical devices. This guidance document focuses on Part 1, the evaluation and testing within a risk management process. This guidance is intended to assist in the industry in pre-market submissions for medical devices that come into direct or indirect contact with the human body in order to determine the potential for unacceptable adverse biological responses resulting from such contact with the component materials of the device. The guidance includes the use of a risk-based approach to determine if biocompatibility testing is needed, and also includes chemical assessment recommendations and recommendations for biocompatibility tests for devices with submicron or nanotechnology components, as well as for devices made from in situ polymerizing or absorbable materials. On September 7th, the FDA released finalized questions and answers on the application of human factors engineering principles for combination products. Human factors engineering is the application of knowledge about human behavior, abilities, limitations, as well as other characteristics of users through the design of products to help ensure safe and effective use of those products. The guidance addresses the definition of a combination product critical task, considerations for combination products due to the use of drug and device components, training as part of the user interface, and human factors validation data to support the combination product user interface that may be included in a pre-market submission, among other topics. This guidance is important to address how consumers and physicians may actually use medical device products and combination products when they're provided to consumers. And it's, of course, important to ensure that user interfaces, other design controls, as well as labeling are tailored in a manner that includes an expectation of how consumers and physicians may actually utilize the product. And this guidance is a good resource to analyzing those types of issues and understanding the relevant factors necessary in designing such products. On September 7th, the FDA requested comments regarding and issued draft guidance addressing practices for selecting a predicate device to support a pre-market notification 510(k) submission. Comments on this guidance are due within 90 days of publication of the draft guidance in the Federal Register. The guidance recommends that submitters identify how they use these 4 best practices outlined by the guidance to select a predicate device from among a set of predicate devices identified by the submitter. The 4 best practices outlined by the guidance include: 1, selecting a predicate device that was cleared using well-established methods, such as the FDA-recognized voluntary consensus standards, qualified medical device development tool, or a widely available and accepted method published in the public domain or scientific literature. The second best practice recommends selecting a predicate device that continues to perform safely after taking into account any post-market reported adverse events, malfunctions, or deaths. The third best practice recommends selecting a predicate device that does not have unmitigated use-related or design-related safety issues after a review of emerging signals and safety communications. The final best practice outlined by this guidance recommends selecting a device that has not been subject to a design-related recall. In explaining the selection process in the 510(k) submission, the FDA recommends that manufacturers use a comparative approach utilizing these four best practices to explain why the submitter selected one predicate device over a group of predicate devices for which these four factors were analyzed. This analysis is particularly important, especially if you're developing a medical device where other predicate devices have had some safety issues in the market previously. This does also play into the level of information that you'll need to submit and whether clinical evidence will need to be submitted to support your application to address whether or not your product has safety concerns that are present in the predicate device and how those safety issues have been identified and addressed. So accordingly, following these best practices is very helpful to mitigate some of the issues associated with selecting a predicate device where there may be a challenging safety record. Now, the FDA does recognize that for some devices, there may not be a predicate device that doesn't have a record of safety issues. And accordingly, in submitting a 510(k), manufacturers should address those safety issues and address how the design of the product addresses concerns raised in the predicate device. On September 7th, the FDA issued draft guidance regarding evidentiary expectations for 510(k) implant devices. Comments are due within 90 days of the draft guidance's publication in the Federal Register. The guidance is intended to assist manufacturers in designing and executing appropriate performance testing to support 510(k) submissions for implants. The guidance also includes other recommendations, including labeling recommendations for implantable products. On September 7th, the FDA also issued draft guidance regarding the use of clinical data in 510(k) submissions. Comments to this guidance are due within 90 days of publication in the Federal Register. This guidance describes the most common scenarios for when the FDA will require or expects to need clinical data in connection with a 510(k) submission. These situations include: one, when there are differences between the indications for use of the new device and the predicate device; two, when there are differences in technological characteristics of the new device and the predicate device, such as, for example, when a new device uses new or developing technology. That could also potentially include software updates where the new device includes software far more advanced than a predicate device. Three, when substantial equivalence cannot be determined by non-clinical testing. And four, when newly identified or increased risk for predicate devices suggests clinical data is needed for the new device in order to determine substantial equivalence. As I mentioned a moment ago, if the predicate device has a challenging safety record, it may be important to submit clinical evidence to explain how the device is substantial equivalent and how the device also addresses safety concerns that were raised with the predicate device. On August 28th, Lincare Holdings agreed to pay $29 million and entered into a 5-year corporate integrity agreement to resolve False Claims Act allegations that have billed Medicare, MA plans, and beneficiaries for oxygen equipment rental payments and co-payments after it had already received the maximum 3 years of payments it was permitted to charge. Medicare DMEPOS suppliers are subject to a myriad of regulatory requirements, including limitations on rental payments, as well as face-to-face requirements for physicians and patients, among other supplier standards. DMEPOS suppliers should have a robust compliance program to ensure compliance with these requirements, particularly in light of the fact that DMEPOS suppliers are subject to direct False Claims Act liability due to their submission of claims to Medicare and Medicare Advantage plans. On August 22nd, Patrick Fishner pled guilty to conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud in connection with a $3.6 million durable medical equipment Medicare fraud scheme. Fishner and his co-conspirators allegedly solicited and received kickbacks in exchange for providing physician orders for medically unnecessary durable medical equipment to durable medical equipment companies. Similar to other DME cases that we've covered in the past, telemedicine companies were allegedly used to obtain fraudulent DME prescriptions for medically unnecessary items. Fishner faces up to 10 years in prison and a fine of up to $250,000 or twice the gross profit or loss. This is yet another durable medical equipment case involving false or fraudulent orders and the use of a telemedicine company. Unfortunately, these activities seem to continue, and there's been significant enforcement effort in this space regarding fraudulent orders and marketing and sales practices. Medical device manufacturers, perhaps not even in the DME space, should be careful in engaging marketing and sales companies to ensure that those companies do not engage in inappropriate activities. It's important to conduct diligence on medical device marketers and suppliers to ensure that they have robust compliance programs, are aware of the regulatory requirements, and are not engaged in unsavory behavior such as that alleged in this case. Thank you for joining me today and this week for Medical Device Legal News. I'm Sam Bernstein, a partner in McGuirewitz Healthcare Group. I would also like to thank my colleague Sophie Moros for helping to make today's program possible. I look forward to seeing you next time.